Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. James Kagny was born on July 17, 1899 in New York City. He grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Kagny came from a working-class Irish-American family and had a hard life when he was young. His dad worked different jobs, like being a bartender. His mom took care of 7 kids in their small apartment. From a very young age, James learned to be tough, smart, and ambitious. These qualities helped shape who he was as a person and in his career. He went to Stuyvesant High School and then studied at Columbia College of Columbia University for a little while. But school wasn't really his thing. Instead, he found himself drawn to performing arts almost by accident. At first, he was interested in art and dance. Soon, he discovered that he loved entertaining people. He started by working as a dancer in vaudeville shows. Later, he tried acting on stage. Kagny's journey into Hollywood happened slowly but surely. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, when silent movies were becoming movies with sound, he moved from Broadway to Warner Brothers Studios. What made Kagny special was his exciting energy on screen. When many actors had trouble adjusting their style for sound films, he brought a sharp, fast-talking, street-smart personality that people loved. His big break came in The Public Enemy in 1931. In this movie, he played Tom Powers, a mean gangster. The film not only made him a star, but it also made him the ultimate tough guy. One unforgettable moment was when Kagny smashed a grapefruit into Mae Clarke's face. This became one of the most famous scenes in movie history. It showed both his violent characters and his fearless way of acting. But in real life, Kagny was nothing like the gangsters he played. Friends and co-workers often said he was a kind, hard-working, and family-loving man who lived quietly when he wasn't on camera. During the 1930s and 1940s, Kagny was a huge star on the big screen. He didn't just play gangsters, but also many different types of characters that showed how talented he was. He could show intense emotion in movies like Angels with Dirty Faces in 1938. In that film, he played a criminal whose death becomes a powerful lesson for young boys. Or he could switch and play funny, light-hearted roles just as well. His talent reached its highest point in Yankee Doodle Dandy in 1942. In this movie, he played entertainer George M. Cohan. This role let him show off his musical and dancing skills. It proved that he wasn't just a tough guy, but also a natural entertainer. His performance won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. This is one of the biggest honors in Hollywood, and it remains one of his most celebrated achievements. Kagny stopped acting in the early 1960s, but he was talked into coming back for a few films in the 1980s. One of these was Ragtime in 1981, which became his last movie appearance. By then, he had already earned the respect of many generations of actors, directors, and audiences. In 1974, the American Film Institute ranked him as the 8th greatest male screen legend of classic Hollywood cinema. This was a well-deserved recognition of his contributions. In 1920, James Kagny's career was still just beginning. He was just another struggling performer in New York trying to make it on the stage. That year, he got a job as a chorus member in the musical revue Pitter Patter. This wasn't the kind of role that would make him famous, but it turned out to be one of the most important moments of his life. This is because during this show, he met Frances Willard, Billy Vernon, another performer. The two quickly formed a strong connection that went beyond the stage. They found in each other a sense of friendship, stability, and understanding. Their romance grew, and on September 28, 1922, James Kagny and Frances Vernon got married. Amazingly, their marriage became one of the longest-lasting marriages in Hollywood history. It lasted over 6 decades until Kagny's death in 1986. This was very rare in an industry that was often full of scandal and short relationships. Frances, who became known as Billy Kagny, lived several years longer than her husband. She passed away in 1994. This showed the strength and loyalty that had been part of their relationship. Even though Kagny and his wife didn't have biological children, they chose to grow their family through adoption. In 1940, they welcomed their first child, a son whom they named James Francis Kagny III. Later, they adopted a daughter, Kathleen Casey Kagny. Both children brought new meaning to Kagny's personal life. They gave him a private role as a father to balance against the intense public demands of his film career. Despite his fame, James Kagny always valued privacy and family more than the glamour of Hollywood. Unlike many other famous people who wanted publicity and constant media attention, Kagny was known as a very private man. He would sometimes let the press take photos. He would often pose nicely with his wife or children when necessary. but he carefully protected the boundaries of his personal life. Away from the cameras, he preferred a quiet life. He would retreat to his farm in New York and later to his estate in Dutchess County. There he could enjoy painting, horseback riding, and nature without people bothering him. Sadly, not all parts of Kagny's family life were peaceful. His only son, James Kagny III, died suddenly of a heart attack on January 27, 1984, in Washington, D.C. This was just 2 years before his father's own death. This was an especially painful loss for the actor. It hurt not only because of the loss itself, but also because he and his son had become estranged in the years before James III's death. Their separation had started around 1982. Father and son never made up before his death. This left a wound in Kagny's personal life that was never healed. The problems in their relationship were very different from the public image of Kagny as a devoted family man. It showed the private struggles that even famous people go through. Unfortunately, the tension within the family went beyond his son. Kagny's daughter, Kathleen Casey Kagny, also became estranged from him during the later years of his life. The details of their disagreements were kept mostly private. This was consistent with Kagny's lifelong habit of keeping his personal matters away from public attention. But it was known that father and daughter grew apart during his final years. Despite their estrangement, Kathleen lived on for many years after her father's death. She passed away on August 11, 2004. Her death marked the closing of another chapter in the Kagny family story. It reflected both the warmth and the difficulties of family life lived in the shadow of fame. James Kagny, one of Hollywood's most iconic and versatile actors, was known for his electric performances. People loved his unmistakable screen presence and his ability to bring raw intensity to any role he played. Audiences adored him for classics such as The Public Enemy, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and countless others. But behind the polished image of the legendary star, there was a man who was outspoken, had strong principles, and wasn't afraid of sharing his true feelings about colleagues in the film industry. While Kagny admired many actors, he didn't shy away from openly criticizing others. And one name that came up in his private conversations was that of Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy, on the other hand, had a story that was almost like a legend. He was a decorated World War II hero. Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor and became America's most decorated soldier before moving into Hollywood. Studio bosses quickly realized that Murphy's reputation as a national hero could make money at the box office. They gave him opportunities in westerns and war films. Audiences respected him, but his acting ability often got mixed reviews. Critics sometimes said Murphy was stiff and relied on his war record rather than real talent. Kagny, who took pride in his craft and the art of performance, supposedly grew annoyed by the way Hollywood lifted Murphy up without holding him to the same standards as classically trained or naturally gifted actors. The man's a hero, no doubt about that, Kagny once said. But being brave on the battlefield doesn't make you a master of the stage or screen. To Kagny, there was a sacred line between the art of acting and the celebrity culture that tried to blur the lines. He hated the idea of studios propping up a war hero and presenting him as an actor equal to experienced performers who had trained their entire lives. In private, Kagny's words about Murphy were harsher. He was reported to have said, "Audie Murphy could barely deliver a line without it sounding rehearsed. A soldier may win medals, but an actor must win over an audience with truth. And truth isn't in a uniform, it's in the soul." This showed the root of Kagny's frustration. He felt that Murphy's career represented Hollywood's increasing reliance on publicity stunts and using fame rather than a true dedication to art. It wasn't personal hate toward Murphy as a man. Kagny, from what everyone said, respected his service to the country, but it was the professional principle that bothered him. In fact, Kagny often acknowledged Murphy's bravery. He even went so far as to say, "I'll never match what he did in Europe." No one could. But let's not pretend heroism translates to artistry. That's not fair to the craft, and it's not fair to him either. This difference in perspective put Kagny in direct opposition to Hollywood executives who championed Murphy as a marketable star. Studios were often more concerned with profit than artistic integrity, and Kagny felt that promoting Murphy as a leading man cheapened the profession he had worked so hard to build up. When you put a man in front of the camera because of his medals instead of his mastery, Kagny once joked, you insult the audience's intelligence. The tension between admiration for Murphy's military heroics and dislike for his acting ability created an unusual contradiction in Kagny's comments. He hated what Murphy's Hollywood career represented, not necessarily the man himself. Still, In a town where public image was everything, those sharp words carried weight. Fans of Murphy saw him as a symbol of American courage. Meanwhile, Kagny represented a more traditional view of cinema as an art form requiring discipline, depth, and emotional honesty. In the end, Kagny's outspoken opinions on Audie Murphy became a reflection of his bigger philosophy about Hollywood. He wanted acting to be respected as a serious craft, not reduced to a marketing trick. For him, Murphy was the example of that trick. And though Kagny himself remained beloved until his death in 1986, he left behind a legacy not only of great films, but also of honesty. He was a man unafraid to say exactly what he thought, even if it meant challenging the popularity of a war hero turned actor. For many, Kagny's words offer a window into the eternal debate in Hollywood. Should fame and image decide success? Or should the art itself be the deciding factor? His dislike for Audie Murphy was less about personal hatred and more about defending the purity of acting. Yet the passion in his remarks leaves little doubt. When it came to the world of film, James Kagny had no tolerance for what he saw as phonies. James Kagny's final years were spent in the quiet countryside, far away from the bright lights of Hollywood that had once defined much of his life. He passed away on Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1986, at the age of 86 on his beloved Dutchess County farm in Stanfordville, New York. This farm, which he had bought years earlier, was more than just a house. It was his sanctuary. Kagny loved the peacefulness of the rural landscape. There he could live surrounded by nature, take care of the land, and enjoy his lifelong love for art, painting, and the simple pleasures of country life. It was on this very property that he took his final breath, dying from a heart attack. The timing of his death happening on Easter Sunday carried symbolic meaning for many. The holiday is deeply connected to themes of resurrection and eternal life. It offered a meaningful reflection on the passing of a man who had become immortal through his work on screen. His death marked the end of an era. For decades, Kagny had been one of the most iconic and respected actors in American cinema. He was known for his fiery energy, commanding screen presence, and ability to shift smoothly between tough gangster roles and light-hearted musicals. Fans across the country mourned the loss of a legend whose career had shaped the golden age of Hollywood. Newspapers carried headlines and tributes, recalling his greatest performances from The Public Enemy to Yankee Doodle Dandy. They recognized how he had left a permanent mark on film history. For many, the news was especially striking because Kagny had lived such a long and full life. He had defied the odds of a career that had often been stormy and demanding. Following his death, a solemn funeral mass was arranged to honor him. The service took place at St. Francis Dale's Roman Catholic Church, located on East 96th Street in Manhattan. This was a fitting choice given Kagny's lifelong Catholic faith. Though Kagny had always been a private man who avoided the excesses of Hollywood and the constant gaze of the press, his funeral brought together a remarkable mix of people. Family, friends, colleagues from the film industry, and admirers who wanted to pay their final respects all came. The church, with its quiet dignity, became the gathering place where people celebrated not only his career, but also his integrity, his devotion to his wife Frances, and his generosity to those he cared for. The funeral mass was filled with both solemnity and gratitude. Clergy members emphasized his Irish Catholic heritage and his dedication to values that went beyond fame. Attendees reflected on his remarkable life journey. He went from a boy growing up in the tough neighborhoods of New York City's Lower East Side to one of the most acclaimed actors of the 20th century. The prayers, hymns, and eulogies carried a sense of reverence. They acknowledged that Kagny was not just a movie star, but also a husband, father, and philanthropist who had touched lives beyond the silver screen.